Most lifters spend years chasing a 315-pound bench, and a 500-pound deadlift can take the better part of a decade, and all of it happens indoors, under the lights, surrounded by machines and coaching and 100 years of sports science. On a black beach on the west coast of Iceland, there was an older test, and it decided something a lot more serious than a personal record. Fail it, and a man lost the job that fed him through the winter. 4 stones sit on that beach. To get hired onto a fishing crew, a man had to heave one of them off the sand and up onto a stone ledge at hip height, come up short on the one that counted, and he was sent home to explain why. The men who passed built the kind of thick, usable strength that would quietly embarrass someone who's trained in a commercial gym for 10 years. None of them ever saw a barbell. So how does a country of fishermen and farmers, with no equipment and no programs, turn out some of the strongest human beings who have ever lived? It comes down to something the modern lifter gave up a long time ago. The stones are the place to start, because they show how seriously these people took the whole business of being strong. The beach is Djúpalónsandr, out on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula under a glacier-capped volcano. For hundreds of years it was one of the busiest fishing stations in the country. Every season, hundreds of men came down to row open boats out into the North Atlantic, and with that many strangers turning up looking for work, the crews needed a quick and honest way to sort the useful from the useless. They used rock, 4 stones, each with a name and a weight. The lightest is amlodi, which translates to something close to weakling, at 23 kilos, about 50 pounds. Then hálfdrættingur, 54 kilos, roughly 119 pounds. Then hafstyrkur, half strong, a flat 100 kilos, 220 pounds. And the big one, fullstyrkur, full strong, 154 kilos, 340 pounds. The bar to get hired was half strong, the 54-kilo stone, lifted onto a natural plinth at hip height, clear it, and a man had a seat in the boat and a share of the catch. Fall short, and he didn't. But the test kept climbing above that line, because the heavier the stone a man could load, the better his spot in the crew and the bigger his cut of the fish. Strength was a pay grade, and the number that should stop you isn't the 340-pound stone, it's the floor. An ordinary working man was expected to heave 119 pounds of smooth, round, handleless rock off wet sand just to be worth feeding. That was the minimum. So what kind of daily life makes 119 pounds of dead weight feel ordinary? Here's the whole secret, and it's almost annoying how simple it is. These people never trained strength. They just lived in a way that made stopping impossible. There was no line between the workout and the day. The work was the workout, and it never let up. Look at what a normal year asked of a body. They rowed, open wooden boats, no engine, out into some of the worst seas on the planet, and back again, for hours, into the swell. That is heavy pulling under load, over and over, everything from the hands to the lower back, fighting to shift water that fights back. No cable machine has ever come close to a fishing boat in an Atlantic gale. They built out of turf and stone. The houses were sod, rock, and whatever driftwood washed up, and every piece of it got carried and stacked by hand. A day of hauling wet turf is loaded carries and squats under another name. They cut hay with a scythe. Getting through winter meant mowing grass by hand and moving it before the weather turned, which is a full day of swinging and lifting and swinging again, against the clock, all summer long. And they pulled fish and lines out of the sea hand over hand, soaked in the cold, until the grip gave out and then kept going anyway. So the average day was heavy pulling, carrying, squatting, and gripping, done with cold hands on awkward objects through whatever range of motion the object demanded. A modern lifter chops that into leg day and back day and grip work and does an hour of it. These people did all of it every day for a whole life, because the alternative was going hungry. The strength was a side effect. What they were actually chasing was dinner and a roof. Raw work only gets a body so far though. It has to be fed. And here, the Icelandic diet did something a nutrition coach today would recognize on sight. Almost nothing grows on Iceland. Grain barely held on in that climate, so bread and porridge sat closer to luxuries than staples, and the diet got built out of the only 2 things the place reliably produced: animals and the sea. Icelanders ran on protein. The center of it was fish, cod above all. More importantly, they dried it into hard fiska, which is basically fish jerky so dry it's more than 80% of pure high-quality protein. You could tear off a strip, chew it like leather, and keep it in a pocket for weeks. Around that came lamb, mutton, and a thick-strained dairy the whole fitness industry has since discovered as skyr. Skyr is cultured, strained, and packed with protein, and Icelanders were eating it 1,000 years before it turned up in a plastic tub with a macro label on the side. Put it together and you get a population living on a high-protein, low-carb, whole-food diet of fish, meat, and milk. Nobody designed it. It was just what a cold volcanic island in the Atlantic would hand you. Heavy work, fed on protein. That engine ran for centuries. Strength didn't only come from labor and get measured on stone. It also got sharpened in a sport the Icelanders have practiced since the settlers arrived, one that turns up by name in the Sagas and is still going today. It's called Glíma. Glíma is belt grip wrestling. Two people grip special belts strapped around the waist and thighs and try to put each other on the ground. And it rewards balance, timing, and constant whole body tension far more than it rewards size. It builds the kind of strength that never shows on a bench, but decides everything in a real scuffle, staying planted while another person tries to move you, and driving force up out of the feet. On top of a life of heavy work, Glíma was the skill layer, the part that turned raw capacity into control. All of this lived inside a culture that was frankly obsessed with physical strength. The Sagas, the medieval prose written down about the settlement age, are stuffed with strongmen. Grettir Asmundarsson, the hero of Grettis Saga and the most famous outlaw in the literature, is remembered for hauling and lifting things no normal man could. Egil Skallagrimsson, poet and killer, is described hauling loads that stretch belief. It would be easy to point at those heroes and decide the strength came from some Viking bloodline the rest of us missed out on. That's the wrong read. The saga strongmen are literature, sharpened and stretched across centuries of retelling. The men clearing a 119-pound stone off a beach to land a fishing job weren't legends. They were regular workers with cracked hands, and the strength was as common as the bad weather. It wasn't a gift, it was built. At a farm called Húsafell, there's a slab of basalt that has become the most famous lifting stone on earth. Around 1756, a parish pastor named Snorri Björnsson set it into the wall of his sheep and goat pen and used it as the gate. Local legend says his own daughter, Gudni, was the one who first carried it all the way around the pen. The stone weighs 186 kilos, 410 pounds. To earn the title full stakur, full strong, a person had to break that 410-pound slab off the ground, roll it up onto the chest, and walk it one full lap around the pen without setting it down. Not deadlift it, not lift it once and drop it. Hug 410 pounds of rounded rock high on the chest, where it flattens the lungs and turns breathing into a fight, and then walk, hunting for balance and air with every step. Elite professional strongmen, men whose entire lives are organized around being as big and strong as biology allows, still rate that as a serious feat. A farming family was pulling it off in the 1700s, with no gym and no notion they were doing anything unusual. They were just strong, because everything about the life made them that way. This is the part worth sitting with, the part that turns all of this from a history lesson into something that should stop a modern lifter cold. The tradition never stopped. It's still winning. Iceland has around 390,000 people living on it today, fewer than a lot of single cities. A country that size has no business showing up in elite strength sport at all. Instead, for a stretch in the 1980s and 90s, it owned the sport outright. Jon Paul Sigmarsson won World's Strongest Man 4 times and did it while turning strongman into pure showmanship. Magnus Ver Magnusson won it 4 more. Then the Icelandic wins dried up for roughly 2 decades, until Hafthor Björnsson took the title in 2018 and later pulled 501 kilograms off the floor, the heaviest deadlift in recorded history. A population the size of one mid-sized city, parked on a frozen rock in the North Atlantic, produced 2 of the most dominant strongmen of an entire era, and then a third who broke the all-time record, and the line runs straight back to the beach. That same Húsafell slab, the pastor's family carried around a sheep pen, now gets loaded into professional competition. The 18th century test and the modern champion are the same unbroken thing. That's the secret, and it was never the gym. Their whole life was the training. It got tested against fixed standards, fed on protein, and respected by everyone around them, and it produced strength most people with a lifetime membership never come close to. Equipment makes strength convenient. That's all it ever did. The body still answers to hard, varied work and real food, and a person can get seriously strong with nothing but their own weight and something heavy to pick up off the ground. That's the whole idea behind the No Gym Warrior program, a 12-week system that takes the training methods cultures like this one lived by and turns them into a plan you can run with nothing but your body. Links in the description if you want to train the way people actually got strong for most of human history. Subscribe and keep building it the old way.